According to Adam Schefter, the Detroit Lions are expected to lose both coordinators, offensive and defensive, in Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn. And I'm going to tell you not so fast. Now, of course, I have no inside information. This is all from a span point, speculation base, just based off statistics. Believe it or not, this channel is based off of two things: statistics and emotion. It really is, the love for the Detroit Lions. So with that in mind, I'm not saying that they won't get jobs, but I have to kind of combat the narrative that both of them are gone, and I'm going to tell you why. Why I think that both will potentially, that they could stay. Now, let's take Adam Schefter, what he said. Tuesday on the Pat McAfee show, he says that he completely expects both Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn to be hired as head coaches for 2025. And I'm going to say, okay, Ben Johnson has been one of the hottest coaching candidates since he took over for offensive coordinator in 2022. We come out that season, we start 6-1, we go 8-2, and we haven't looked back since. And from that moment, every single year, he has been one of the top head coaching candidates. We know about Ben Johnson and his, I call him a deer. Speaking of deer, I saw a few. It was about 10 running across the street the other night, the most I've ever seen. And they were just like running, man. I blew the horn. I thought they were going to run. One looked up at me. He looked back down, started eating. The other one start running every which way. So I compare Ben Johnson to a deer, easily spooked. He has to make sure that the situation is perfect. We've seen him turn down the Carolina Panther job. We've seen him on the plane decide that he doesn't want to go to the Washington Commanders, who ironically we have to face, which I just thought about. Storyline, I just thought about that just now. We have to face in the divisional round. But Ben Johnson, we know that he is going to be very, very strategic when it comes to taking a head coaching position. Had he interviewed for the New England Patriots, and they hired Mike Vrabel instead, which I think is a great choice for them. Now, let's move to Aaron Glenn, because I think Aaron Glenn's situation is a little more unique. I've been very difficult, very hard on Aaron Glenn and his defensive performance. And to be honest with you, the defense is great inside of the red zone, and we're great on third down, and which allows us to be great when it comes to points per game. We still allow a lot of yards in between the 20s. Our pass defense is hideous. Our rushing the passer, hideous. And that might not be Aaron Glenn's fault. I mean, Aaron Glenn did set the blueprint on how to beat Sam Darnold and the Minnesota Vikings. And we saw the Rams follow that blueprint in the wild card round. So I got to give him his credit. But I don't think he's always been like the best defensive coordinator. But I think he's been the token black guy. And if you don't know what that means, that was a phrase back in the 90s, probably the early 2000s when it came to movies. There was always one black guy in a movie, and you called him the token black guy. And Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, has been the token black guy. He's been interviewed in ways or teams that he knew he wasn't going to get the job. That's probably why he turned down the New England Patriots job, because he knew that he was the token black guy, aka the Rooney Rule requirement. The Rooney Rule states that you have to interview during a coaching cycle. You have to interview at least one minority head coach. It doesn't have to be a black head coach. It just has to be a minority head coach. And up until this year, I truly believe that Aaron Glenn has been 100% a Rooney Rule candidate. He has not been in consideration, strong consideration, for any head coaching job. This year, though, things are different. He is playing. We have the most players on injured reserve. 16 of those players, or 13 of them, are on defense. Our entire defensive starting line is out except DJ Reader. Season-ending injuries. And yet we have the first seed. We're the number one red zone defense. We're the number one third down defense. That's a big deal. And that is worthy of a strong consideration, real consideration for a head coaching job. However, here's why I say not so fast. Both coaches. We know about Ben Johnson. We know about Aaron Glenn. Ben Johnson is thinking about the future. He's thinking about the future. He's thinking about beyond this first contract. Because if you look at the overall likelihood of success, you have to incorporate that. How likely are you to get a second contract? That's number one. If you don't get a second contract and you get fired, or you just don't get rehired like Mike McCarthy, what are the odds that you get a second head coaching job? And then we skip to a guy like Ron Rivera, who is on his third head coaching opportunity, that he's trying to get a head coaching job for a third time. Now, as far as I remember, there wasn't a gap between him getting fired from Carolina and getting hired in Washington. But I'm going to tell you why teams might want to pause on him. Yes, he took the 2015 Carolina Panthers to the Super Bowl, but he also was the head coach of a team that the new head coach in the Washington Commanders, Dan Quinn, goes immediately to the divisional round of the playoffs the year after you get fired. So I think that's going to give some teams a little bit of pause on Ron Rivera. But look at the likelihood. You get a job, you got to get a second contract. If you don't get a second contract and you get fired or either just not retained, you have to try to get a second opportunity. And those are extremely rare. They do not happen. I don't know if y'all know this, but no Detroit Lions head coach has gotten a head coaching job in the NFL after they left the Detroit Lions. Dick Duran was interim head coach. That does not count. I'm talking about you get fired from the Detroit Lions, you don't get retained, and then you get a head coaching job somewhere else. Now, they might have a head coaching job, come to Detroit, and then never coach again, like a Steve Mariucci, like there's another guy I can't think of. I think he came from somewhere else. Not Jim Caldwell, but came from somewhere else, right? So the buck usually stops after the first hire. You would be fortunate to get hire number 2, and number 3 is almost impossible. So if I'm a guy like Cliff Kingsbury, I'm going on my second head coaching opportunity. I have to be very selective. But what about Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson? Let's take a look at the current head coaching availabilities and find out when these coaches were hired and fired. The New England Patriots, they hired Gerard Mayo January 5th of 2024. He was fired January 5th of this year, and they hired Mike Vrabel. Mayo was hired last year, so he was one and done. Dallas Cowboys, they are talking about Deion Sanders. Mike McCarthy was one of those head coaches I was talking about. Now, he was a Green Bay Packers head coach. He just got done with his second opportunity. He is probably going to get a third. The Bears and Saints are really into Mike McCarthy. I could see him getting a job and being on his third. Now, that's extremely rare. That is unprecedented territory. Andy Reid, second opportunity. So what about Las Vegas Raiders? Antonio Pierce was hired last year, fired this year, after having Josh Jacobs, Max Crosby, Devontae Adams all vouch for you. They're all gone, and now so are you. One and done. So that's 2 coaches that are one and done. And Antonio Pierce is minority. Who else? Jacksonville Jaguars. Doug Peterson had 3 seasons. He was also on, I believe, his second opportunity. I would be surprised if he gets a third. He did get a Super Bowl championship with the Philadelphia Eagles all those years ago. That might be enough to carry him to a third. But 3 years later, okay, so if we look at this, the Mike McCarthy, if we go back up here, how many seasons was Mike McCarthy in Dallas? Let's go down. Let me see. Mike McCarthy, we looked at him. Maybe 3, 4, somewhere around there. It could have been more than that. But again, go to the Chicago Bears. Matt Eberflus, 3 seasons. So what you're seeing is between 1 and 3 seasons that coaches are fired. Now, let me cut back to me real quick. Remember that if you are going to a situation where you are the head coach and you are a new hire, meaning that means they fired their other guy, which means the team sucks. So not every situation is going to end up like the Washington Commanders where because Ron Rivera was horrible at drafting first-round picks and all this stuff, where you got lightning in the bottle, where you go from the second pick in the draft to 12-5 NFC divisional game. Like, that's rare. That doesn't happen a lot. So what I'm saying is you get hired, you're probably going to have a not-so-great year 1. Now, these coaches are getting fired on an average of maybe 3 years. And Ben Johnson said that. What is the over-under on coaches getting a second contract after 3 years? So let's just say that the average head coach, new hire, gets a 3-year deal, but you're already behind the 8 ball because the first year is probably going to suck, right? So keep that in mind. Matt Eberflus, we know. New Orleans Saints, another fired over 3 seasons. Went 18-25. So you can see a pattern here. Now, I don't know if Dennis Allen is going to get another job, and I can't recall if he had one before as far as head coaching job. The New York Jets, Robert Saleh, fired after 4 seasons. Now, he was hired when Dan Campbell was hired. So that 4 seasons is actually being a bit gratuitous because he was fired after 5 games in his 4th season. Okay. Now, keep in mind, our coach got an extension after his 3rd because he actually made the playoffs. He actually won 2 playoff games, right? So here we go. 3 seasons. Robert Saleh, minority head coach. Who else? And that's it. That's right now. Those are the available coaching jobs right now. What did you see? You saw the same type of pattern that was going on. Now, let's focus primarily on Aaron Glenn. If Aaron Glenn gets hired in a head coaching position, the good news for the Lions is that we get 2 third-round compensatory picks, one in 2025, one in 2026. So at least Aaron Glenn, would give us a parting gift in getting hired as a minority head coach. But if you're Aaron Glenn and you probably want to go to a place where you and the general manager are hired at the same time. I don't remember if the Saints still have their GM, but I know the Jets don't. So you probably would want to go there. I wouldn't want to go there because of the Jets, but you would probably want to go into a situation where both of you guys come in together, where you're probably tied. Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes are tied together. John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan tied together. You want to go to places like that. You don't want a situation like we had where Jim Caldwell was hired, Mayhew was fired, Bob Quinn came in, and he wanted him gone from day one. All right. Now, that inevitably led to Dan Campbell, and that's our guy. Okay. Everything happens the way it's supposed to. But if I'm Aaron Glenn, I have to be more cautious than Ben Johnson. Why? I'm a minority head coach. Our opportunities are even lower than those who aren't minorities. Not everybody is Mike Tomlin. Not everybody has an organization as patient as the Rooneys and the Pittsburgh Steelers. You don't get Mike Tomlin. They don't fall off trees. Mike Tomlin, if he's anywhere else, he is not the head coach right now. He doesn't make it almost 20 years. There's a reason the Pittsburgh Steelers have only had 3 coaches in the last 60-something years or whatever it's been since the 60s. You don't get that opportunity. So when it comes to Aaron Glenn, this is why I say not so fast. If I'm Aaron Glenn, you know that Dan Campbell loves you. He wants you to stay. You know that your situation is Gucci here. And yes, you want a head coaching opportunity, but do you want to succeed in that head coaching opportunity? Do you want to just call yourself a head coach just to do it? Or do you want to win games and cement a legacy? I promise you, Matt Patricia will never, ever see a head coaching job in the NFL, ever. He got his one shot. He was terrible. He will never see it again. Aaron Glenn is already behind the 8 ball. Whether you like it or not, whether you want to admit it or not, he is behind the 8 ball. And because of that, his job is going to be harder to stay relevant and stay where a team wants to keep him in 3 years. And Aaron Glenn might get a second opportunity. He might even get a third opportunity. But how rare is it that these guys get those opportunities? Especially if you have if Aaron Glenn gets a job with the Saints and he has a losing record for 3 years straight, he probably will not get a second opportunity because they won't have anything to base anything on, right? Ron Rivera went to a Super Bowl. He didn't win it, but he went. That was enough to get him to the Commanders, and we see what happened there. So, although I think it's a strong possibility that these 2 gentlemen take jobs, I think it's a strong possibility they don't, because you're talking about legacy, ladies and gentlemen. What do you want your legacy to be? Look at Eric Bieniemy. Smart. I think Eric Bieniemy was smart. He was smart because he decided maybe he wasn't going to be the best head coach. And he decided, you know what? I'm not even, he was Ben Johnson before he was Ben Johnson was Ben Johnson. And what I mean by that is Eric, every single coaching cycle, it was Bieniemy this, Bieniemy that, Bieniemy this, Bieniemy that, because of the success that he had with the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, he is, I believe, with the Washington Commanders. I think. Maybe he was there with Rivera. I don't know. I can't remember. But Eric Bieniemy knew what was up. He stayed in his lane, and he made a decision. I'm not sure he ever will step out of the coordinator position. Even Dan Quinn, a second opportunity, right? He was the head coach of the Falcons, I believe, not too long ago. So we could be having these same conversations about Kevin O'Connell in 2 years. So owners are less patient. Legacy is important. Will the Detroit Lions, the coordinators, will they be willing to chance their legacy and spend their one possible shot at a head coaching job in an organization that they're going to be a year behind just because you expect year one to suck? They're going to have 2 years to turn this thing around. And if you're Aaron Glenn, you got to be careful, man, because how many opportunities are you going to get being a minority head coach? It's a sad reality, but it's a reality. So I wouldn't be surprised if both these gentlemen stay. Aaron Glenn, do you want your legacy to be? Because I'm telling you, you're not going to remember Aaron Glenn, the coordinator. You're not going to remember Aaron Glenn sitting on the bench because his defense has been dominant. You're going to remember Aaron Glenn, the failed head coach. Same thing with Ben Johnson. You're not going to remember the stumble bump. You're going to remember the failed head coach, Ben Johnson. And then what do they always do? They always come back to coordinator positions. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Just a little something I was thinking about. We do more than just report news on this channel. You know, sometimes we have to have the deep conversations. This is a fan-driven brand. This is not just simply news, rumors, and all that other stuff. Sometimes we make a video for 17 plus minutes, but they're always important when I do. Anyway, this channel is made possible by viewers, subscribers, and members just like you. You could be anywhere else on YouTube, but you choose to rock on with me. You guys are awesome. Take care of yourself and each other. Don't be a young punk. And as always, go Lions.